Welcome to Divine Insights. This is a part of our Phoenix Rising series. This is Ellen Teresa. This is part 2 of her story. Part 1, we went over her experience as a young adult and teenager of being sex trafficked. And this part of our series, she'll be explaining to us the rest of her journey, and it was definitely a wonderful turning event for her. She went through her healing, and you'll hear that on our part 1. So please go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't, and I hope you enjoy her story. It's phenomenal. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I would say that there is a lot. And so before I get started, I just want to talk why I feel it's really important that I'm doing this on the fall equinox.
Yes, we are.
And this is the time, everybody knows, where the sun crosses the equator and night and day are equal in length. And to me, that speaks of balance. And it totally means, for me anyway, a time of transition where we're moving from the summer, we're going into the fall. But this part of my video is going to be about transition. It's going to be about not just finding healing and that's it, but then it's moving into a place of balance and beginning on the path of service to others. And so this transition for me to alchemize all that pain, all the things that I went through, is just as important, if not even more important in some ways, to the planet as a whole. Because a lot of people can go through healing, they can go through all these things, and then they do nothing with it, and they become a stagnant pool, and they never give out from what they have received. But I'm not like that. Like, I'm the type that has to give out, because when the healing happened, I made a contract really with Spirit, and I said, these things happen in my life, these positive things that you're doing, then I am going to go and I'm going to help all these other people that you've put across my path, and I'm going to give back the way that you gave to me and more. And so for me, honestly, part of the alchemizing journey was graduating university and getting my teaching degree, which honestly, when you fail out of high school and now you're teaching public high school, that in itself is an alchemizing of this place of failure into a place of success. And so I taught for 10 years in a public high school teaching emotionally and disturbed adolescents, the very same students with the same label that I was given. And I was teaching them about how to work through their anger and all of these things. But what is interesting was there was a lot of supernatural events that would happen with these kids. They would walk into my room, they would start crying. Some of them would have outbursts. And I knew that what was happening to them was what had happened to me. All this healing was going out, and I'm experiencing them having these like crazy experiences. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I would continue to help them through their transitions, help them graduate. At different times, I even prayed over some of the students who were going through things like if they had nightmares and these type of things, and the nightmares stopped. Like, one girl used to really hear voices, and I mean in a way that was not good, voices that were trying to lead her to kill herself. And one night I was awakened, Spirit gave me a vision. I saw her on the back of a road, and I knew she was going to kill herself. And so I sent out, obviously, into the universe, and I said, that girl needs rescued. Can we divinely intervene? 2 days later, she shows up into my room, and I said, were you on such a road, back, telling her the road, telling her all of these things? And she said, I was. She said, I was going to end my life. And she said, suddenly I just decided not to, and I turned around and went back.
That's amazing. I got chills all over.
Yes. And she was not sent to the mental institution where they were going to send her because she was not a risk anymore. And like her whole life began to change. And so for me, I was like, what is going on? Like, obviously what was imparted to me is now being, transmitted out to all these people. And so I did that for about 10 years, worked with the students. I wrote behavior plans. I worked with their families. I worked with a lot of sexual abuse. A lot of girls were being abused in their homes. I taught on a school that was on the border of Pennsylvania and New York, So a lot of the students had no parents because the parents were commuting to the city to work. And we know what that can all create. Okay, we had abandonment issues in the classroom. We had rebellion because they could do whatever the hell they wanted to do and when. And during that time, I was given a lot of intuitive insights into these students. Like I knew they were going to go do something before they did it. I would know there was abuse happening.
They didn't have a chance.
They had no chance. I know. And I was realizing, my gosh, like, this is really incredible. And so I actually was really content in that work. I liked it. I worked with parole officers. I went to court with the kids. I worked with psychologists, psychiatrists. But little did I know that Spirit had a whole other plan. Because even though I was working with sexual abuse, there was still something inside of me that was like, I really want to work with the girls from the ways that I went through. And I want to work with the boys that have gone through this. And I want to work with, everybody. And even in the teaching profession itself, like I was growing in confidence, like all the tools were being imparted to me.
Being groomed.
Yes, I was being groomed in a good way this time.
In a good way.
To flow, to counsel, to be able to give divine insight when it would come, because sometimes these kids would bring things and I would be like, I don't know exactly what to say, and I just quiet myself, and then boom, an answer would come. And so it was definitely like an internship with Spirit, really, to prepare me for where I was headed. And one day I was sitting at my desk, and I will never forget this, but I always had my lights out so the kids didn't look in the room. It was my time of a break, and I was just relaxing, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden the energy of the room began to change, and it was almost like if it could have really happened, it would have, but it was like the roof felt like it was opening up, and it felt like all the papers around the printer were moving. None of that was happening. But it was like in my mind's eye, I was like, I'm seeing something. What's going on? And then I just heard, you are done here. That was it. I heard the voice. You are done here.
Wow.
And I thought, I'm done? Where am I going? Like, what's the next question? Like, what do you mean I'm done? I'm content. I'm enjoying my job. Everything's well. It's all going well. And then it was like, you're going overseas. And I knew at that point, I thought, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to get into all of this work. But like, where do you start with something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because trafficking, as you know, is very underground in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of networking. So how do you do this? So I did what I thought I would do. I joined this group called Youth with a Mission. They have, all these stations all over the world, and they do a lot of different justice work. They do charity water, they do poverty, they work with orphanages, and I'm like, well, who's focusing in on trafficking? I want to find that. But I was still not ready yet to jump exactly into that. I needed 2 more years to work in the justice arena on foreign soil, which opened up my eyes to see things I'd never seen.
Did you know that? Did you know?
I knew, no. So what I did, so I had this big manual. It's about this thick, and it's like in 117 nations, and I thought, what am I to do with this? So I just threw it, and it was a manual of all these bases, and it opened up to New Zealand. And then I thought, I'm going to try it 2 more times. So I threw it again, and every time the book would open, it would open on New Zealand in the exact same base, which was Crystal Springs base. And they had a justice program that was there. So basically what I did was I went over there. You go through about a 4 to 5 month training where you learn about various areas of justice. I didn't know anything about necessarily poverty in India. I didn't know about water needs in Africa. I didn't know a lot of things that were happening in Asia with, viruses or, things like this. I didn't know all that. So part of the lessons for me were to teach me all of that. And then you go away. You choose where you're going to go. And so for the next 3 months, you're then on another foreign soil doing like this type of work.
So New Zealand was really
the
schooling.
starter, right? New Zealand was the starter, and then so for 4 months I was in like these classes where you learn how to deal with culture, how to not be so American in a New Zealand culture, even how to not be American in all these other spaces and places, but to learn how to blend, to learn how to become familiar. I not language-wise, that's a plus, but just how to approach culture. How to not stand out but blend. How to not be loud in a quieter culture. Or in a culture like Europe, when I was in Europe for a while, had to learn different ways of their history and realizing, things like the Holocaust and things affected all those nations. So this was all like a major learning curve for me, but I loved it. I was like so up for it. So the first place that I went, and I've been to many, but I will just preface, a lot of these, was to India. And my heart fell in love with India. I was just like, I love India, I love India. But I knew in India there was a lot of sexual abuse. I knew there was a lot of violence. I knew there was a lot of things. And I was there working with Mother Teresa's ministry for a while. I did 2 weeks with her, where we were just taking care of orphans, and we were doing laundry, and we were doing just basic servitude type jobs and just taking care of people. And that really gave me a heart and like a passion for foreign nations, but gave me a heart and passion then for the marginalized, those in poverty. I was holding babies that had diseases where you can see like their ribs and things. And I had never seen that. I went to leper colonies. I had never seen leprosy. So my eyes were being opened to not just justice issues, but issues within the nation itself. Like, oh my goodness. So I was there for 4 months. But during that time, I would frequent this street called Park Street, and they had like a neat night market, and I'd go do my night market stuff, because that's when you go in Asia, is to the night market. And I would start seeing these white cars pull up, and they had tinted windows. And I came to find out that these were government cars, government-owned cars. And I would see a girl get out. And I was like, well, that's very interesting. Why is she getting out of that car? And then I would see another girl come across and get in the car. And I would watch this interaction. I kept being drawn to that street. And I kind of got myself in trouble a little bit because I was always wanting to go down to that street. But little did I know that Spirit was leading me, because he was showing me something, right? I'm showing you something. And so I took this other friend with me, and she's like, we're going there again. I said, we're going there again, And so we would come, we would barter, we'd buy our little fruit, and then we would sit. And I said, let's just observe this street. Over time, I realized exactly what was happening. This was prostitution that was going on, but it was also very, very calculated, extremely calculated, because there were 2 sets of vehicles I was starting to notice that had older girls, and then there were other vehicles that had younger girls. And I would say minors. I would say under 17. And I was like, this is so interesting. Well, one night, courage came over me and boldness came over me. And oh my gosh, I'll never forget this. But I saw a girl get out, and she was moving really, really quickly. And they would always go to a back alley and stuff like that. And I never went down that back alley. I was content eating my fruit, watching the activity here. But I thought, we're supposed to go after her. And I was with a girl named Vicky, and she's like, I don't think we should do this. I said, I think we should. So
You were guided.
I was guided. I was totally guided. But little did I know what I was getting myself into. But this was where my heart just like came alive with vision. So we're going down this back alley. This girl is rushing. She's rushing where she's going. And then we got to an end, and she couldn't go any further. And I thought, well, what is she doing? So she's sitting down, and she started to cry. And I went over to her to talk to her. She was deaf. We could, I know. So now I'm like, what type of scenario is this? I can't even like communicate with the girl. But I had learned that other cultures, such as like Asian cultures, they're warm culture climates, which means they love a lot of physical touch. And so I thought, okay, I know that this girl is being traumatized. I can see it because I've been through the similar. I could see the patterns. I could see the fear. She was, like this. My friend wanted to get out, but I was like, we're staying. So I just continued to stay. And so I got literally on my hands and knees, and I slowly, just like my own counselor had done to me, I talked out loud even though she couldn't hear me. But I said, I am coming to you. I just want to sit in front of you. Are you okay? Now, I knew she couldn't hear me, but I could talk with this.
Yeah.
I had learned how to talk with my body for negative reasons before, but now it was being used for positive. And as I started to come up to her, she her arms relaxed and everything, and I was able to give her a huge hug. And that's all we did. That was it. And then I got up and I left. But something inside of me knew that this is what I need to do. This is where I need to plant my feet. Yeah. And the tears came, and I could just feel presence everywhere. There was love there. I think I probably didn't sleep for like the next 3 days.
I was wondering how you were going to respond
yeah.
to that. But did that take you back to your days of abuse, or were you staying in the present moment of knowing this is your work now?
It did not take me back to the present of abuse, other than the healing portion of it and how to minister to her. If I had not had that specific type of healing, that really divine healing, the way it was done, I wouldn't have known what to do. And this is not a culture that you run up and you just, oh, hey, you know, what's going on? And so that to me started the whole ball rolling. After that, my next 3 months within India, I was running into this all the time. I was running into domestic violence more. I was running into sexual abuse survivors more. At the orphanage I was at, one of the girls was trafficked. They asked me to help with her, and you know, what does that look like? Do you know how to speak to her? And all of the stuff that I had learned from my own counselor, I then was implementing, but it was happening on a very, it was like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an incremental level. Like I just kept getting more and more girls and more people I was running into who were being sold by their families, who were prostitutes. Villages, you know, there's always a bad name that came with prostitutes. Even if you're sold into your family, it's like, this is terrible. But those were the people that were drawn to me, and I was drawn to them. And I would find them at the most unique times. I would be walking in the middle of Calcutta, and it would be like, I would hear the voice, turn right, then turn left at the first crossroads and go in the first door. And I'd turn right, I'd go left, I'd open the door. It would appear to be like an idol shop, or you know, some sort of cover for a shop. And then I just kept walking, and I would go behind these like curtains, and I would see things happening, you know, like men with girls, and men with, you know, boys, women with little girls, women with little boys, you know. And I was like, what is going on? Then I get run out of the store, obviously. But what was interesting is I would have these opportunities to be able to see things. Every nation that I have been in, I have been put in places, sometimes because I would hear a voice and say, go. Other times it would appear random, but it was never random. And I would land myself in these spaces, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a brothel. Oh my goodness, I'm now in a red light district. Oh my gosh, like, wow, they're selling that girl over there. Oh my goodness, they're selling that boy over there. And so the more my eyes began to become aware of a surrounding that is not my own nation, I began to see it then in every nation. And I began to see the patterns that were happening. So eventually I moved out of things like water justice that I was doing for a while, because in the middle of the water justice, I would see someone who was going through abuse.
Totally guided. I mean, it's just showing you your work in this.
Completely.
And I mean, for you to be so in tuned and know that take a right, take a left, you followed that guidance to a T. I mean, you could have been walking into any kind of situation.
That's correct.
And you had faith, you kept yourself intact.
I did. And that came from teaching. That came from knowing what my students were doing, finding them in the building. It was like prepping me all for this moment, yet higher risk, higher stakes, obviously. And then from there, I, you know, went to all these 37 nations and 4 different continents. And sometimes I would be under the guise of like water programs or feeding programs, but my eye was always attuned to what was happening around me. And I began to see huge connections between poverty and trafficking. We would go to these places. I mean, there was a girl one time, I was in Africa. I spent time in West Africa. I cannot say the nation, that one, but I was in West Africa. And this man tried to sell me his own son, like just right there we were. He's like, you know, you from rich country, need money. And I'm like, I don't have a lot of money, but okay. You know, what are you doing? And he pulled out his son, his little son. I mean, I would say he was maybe 3, 4. And he was willing to just give me that son for money. Now, I could have been a trafficker.
Yeah.
I could have been all sorts of things. Obviously, I wasn't. He might have felt that, you know, and he thought maybe he'll take care of, you know, my son, take her back. But But I was just like, oh my goodness, this is like happening everywhere. And so then I moved into areas working with child soldiers. I worked with child soldiers in Africa. Child soldiers is also a form of trafficking. See, trafficking always involves money. And so it's the selling of someone for something, for money. Eventually, sex trafficking became the focus, but I was, again, in the school of learning, right? Learning about child soldiers. I had never seen that. That was so different.
Yeah, describe that. Like, what's the ages
Oh, my
and
goodness.
what were these soldiers used for?
Boy, they're, it's Africa. So Africa has a lot of guerrilla groups that are running around. And so they use boys that they can groom and they can teach how to be men. It's under the guise of men. You've got kids 8, 9 holding machine guns who are taking care of, big buildings that they want them to take care of. The older they get, the more they teach them how to shoot people, okay, who will come. And then when they want to do like this big, huge thing, like they want to take down somebody or whatever, which I never witnessed, they then move to, you need to shoot these people. This is how it is. But there's years and years of grooming. You're just there kind of acting like I have a military uniform on. I'm accepted. It's usually orphans. It's those who don't have families. Wow. It's people they can just get and take and manipulate and control. Yeah. And that's the whole thing about trafficking. That's the whole thing about abuse and violence. You have the perpetrator who can smell a mile away somebody who's vulnerable, somebody who's in a space and place where they can be used for their purposes. And so a lot of them were drinking at 9 and 10, they'd be hanging out. They were doing military things, learning how to set off bombs, firing machine guns at the age of 6. At the age of 6.
That's crazy.
Yes. And then when they were called upon, they would send in the kids first. Usually the young kids went in and they would be the ones that would be shot up, or they'd be the ones who'd be scouting the territory in the area. And I got to know a few of them and they hated it, but it was like they didn't have, what other choice did they have?
Right.
Are we going to go on the streets? My family doesn't want me.
So they were being fed, they were being clothed,
yes.
They were being taken care of.
As long as they did what they were supposed to do.
Right.
So that was another form of trafficking that I was seeing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a crossover between my own life, between what I saw in India with abuse and violence and sex trafficking. Oh my goodness, I'm seeing the connections. And then I worked in Africa with the Gariboo boys. And the Gariboo boys are boys that are sold to Islamic teachers. It's considered an honor, but they are sold. So keep this in mind. There's a lot of, you got to follow the money. Right. Well, even in the work I was doing, and it was a lot of humanitarian, I was following the money. You could see right where the money was going and coming from, where it was being funneled, who it was being funneled to, why, all of that. So the Gariboo, our approach, well, basically the Gariboo come into an Islamic teacher's control by being sold at the age of 8. That is an honor. Because now they want to become an imam, which is a Islamic teacher. Now the parents have no idea what's happening. They're given a little bit of money. It's considered a real, amazing thing. This is awesome. It's an honor. I was in primarily a Muslim nation. 98% of it's Muslim where I was. So it was a very big deal. I don't have enough to provide for my child, so I'm going to send them to the imam. He's giving me some money. My child will be fed. Little do they know what actually happens to a Gariboo boy. And you can find this online. You can read about them. They are required to memorize the Torah. So they're given memorize the Quran. And they read the Quran for hours. We're talking 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And they're all saying it over and over and over. They don't know what any of it means. They know nothing. They are just told to read this. Then at a certain time, they take their little buckets, and you can see them all over Africa. And they take their little buckets and they go out and they have to get food because they're not provided for food.
Oh, wow. So their families are thinking they're being taken care of.
Correct.
And these boys, at what age?
At the age of 8 is when they come into the care of the imam.
They're having to literally go out and fend for themselves.
And so our buses, like when we were on buses, we'd pull up and we'd hear this song of blessing, and we'd look out, and I was like, what is this? And it was these little boys with these little buckets. And I got really interested in that, and that's how I got all involved in the Gariboo, because I was like, what are the Gariboo? And so what we did was we would do a feeding program for them, and the imam had no problem with that because they were getting food, and they would come, but a lot of times they took time to sleep because they were up all night. They had to have a certain amount of their bucket filled with food, and all of that. If not, they were beaten. And then they were back up at the crack of dawn when the prayer call would go, and you would hear them chanting all of the Quran over and over, and this was their life. But they're thinking, I'm learning the Quran, I'm becoming spiritual, but they weren't. They weren't learning, they don't even know what it means. That's the whole thing. The more students that an imam had with Gariboo, the higher he would rise in a rank amongst the Muslim community. And so that was seen as like a good thing. You know, like, I'm rising in rank, I have all these people I'm taking care of. But lots of abuse would happen, the boys would be violated. Sometimes they would have sex with the imam if the imam, wanted it. It's just like, I'm going to have sex with you, and that's how it is. And in the meantime, they're hungry. They're going around. They were the sweetest boys ever. I played soccer with them. I loved them, but they were tough as nails when it came to some things. And the older boys took care of the younger boys. The older boys, and at about the age 14, 15, they transition to become an imam. But up to that point, the older boys are telling them how to do things. Don't get in trouble. What's interesting with all of this too is you would lay out a huge bowl of rice and meat, and they would just all dip their hands in it, right? But they would stick it in their pockets, and I remember I was like, gosh, they're hungry, but they're saving it for later, and they're saving it for their little bucket, okay? Mm-hmm. And their buckets are about that big, and they just carry them around, and there's flies in them, and it's because they got food, and the more they don't get food, and the more that they don't come back with a certain quota, the harder the repercussions are. So that was another form of trafficking. Who was getting the money? The imam. He was also getting rank, popularity, influence, and the boys were treated like shit.
Gosh, that's so many nations with so many different trafficking. That's awful. Awful.
Is.
And the parents are thinking these boys are taken care of. What was the purpose that they had to fill their bucket? Was that they were only allowed to go out once a day, so they had to have enough food through the day, like to make sure they were healthy?
They had to have some food in their body. They did, because if they were starving, the imam could be held accountable.
Oh, interesting. Who does the imam
report to?
That's
a good question. What I discovered over there, and again, this is just from my own observation and being there, was it's different for every village. The farther into the bush we went, the weirder it all became. Because in the cities, there was a lot of, you could see the corruption with the police, you could see, there was corruption with government officials, you could see these type of things. But when you go out into the African bush, okay, and you have to imagine a space and place that is just complete desert, you're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we lived in little tents with holes in them with, craziness, scorpions, spiders, all like crazy stuff. But the farther you go out to the bush, the imam of each village is in charge, is the spiritual leader.
Oh, he's the shaman then.
Yep, very much like a shaman, yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so he's in charge. He's the one who runs everything. And so he can run it however he wants, because who is watching him way out in the African bush? It took us 6 hours on a bush taxi to get to the bush. And that's with lots of stops and all sorts of different type of stuff getting out there.
There's a bush taxi.
Is
it really?
It's called a bush taxi. And this is a funny story, but the bush taxi basically is a van with no windows in it at all. So there's red dust coming in. And I mean, I was like, you talk about wearing a mask during now for COVID. We didn't just have masks. We had scarves that covered our faces, and I had sunglasses, and our heads were covered. We looked, like Cousin It is what we really look like when we were going through this. But it's very a spiritual place, though, because everybody would be hanging rats and hanging all these different totems and all these different things that were important to them to travel through all the checkpoints safely. So there would be a lot of chanting on it, and there'd be a lot of different things going, and then we're headed out, to the bush. And the farther out you got, there's no electricity. Okay, you didn't have, so everything's dark. So we have our little flashlights. Nobody can see what's happening or going on. You just have fires. And so just environmentally, it is set up and very conducive for terrible activities to be going on, and no one's watching it. Police don't go out to the bush. Why would they want to go out to the bush? There's nothing out in the bush,
Right.
And so we would see these Garibus go from village to village to village, walking with their little buckets, taking shifts, doing all these things. And that inspired me to actually take a trip to Papua New Guinea. And in Papua New Guinea, I saw another side of trafficking. And this one actually was amongst churches. There were churches that were involved with these trafficking. Now, I'm still working with these organizations. So these are organizations focused on orphans, still focusing, on justice things. But obviously what's coming into my parameter, my vision now is I want to go to these places that are dealing with the areas of trafficking. And I was still going for the sex trafficking, and I would still see it. The Garibu were sex trafficked as well, used for the Iman. So I went to Papua New Guinea, and Papua New Guinea has only one way you can fly in. So you fly into Port Moresby, which is a huge, huge city. I saw it immediately. I got out. I started seeing the natives from the mountains, the highlands. That's where they get a lot of them. In the highlands down prostituting. It was very open. You could just see it. It was all different ages. You're talking, I would say 8, 9. That's me looking at some of them, all the way up into their 30s. So I saw that immediately when we got out. We were in Port Moresby for only a couple days because there was rioting that was happening, and we had to get out, and it wasn't safe. And so I had to help move this team of people that I was working with. And so we had to go to the highlands, was the next spot. We were divinely led to the highlands. If you know anything about the highlands of Papua New Guinea, very few white people go there. This is where cannibalism still happens, still goes on. And there's lots of mining that happens up that way, which we did not know at the time.
What kind of mining do you know?
Gold, silver. It's actually a very wealthy nation.
I was going to say, so this is not you're in the bush.
Oh, no.
There's money involved.
There's money. There's definitely money involved. And so to fly was the only way that we could get to the highlands because there's no roads to get there. And it's beautiful up there, okay? You have waterfalls. It's absolutely beautiful. But the only reason we went to the highlands was because one day we were in a time of meditation and somebody said, I see a gold bar. They were having a vision of like a gold bar. And I was like, a gold bar? What's a gold bar? Long story short, we looked it up online, we're like, what is this all about? And we found that there was this little village that you could go and they, did gold, and you could pan gold and you could do all this. So I was like, oh, let's just head up there. Now, we always had a purpose when we got there. I know.
I love that. No, I get this. Like, you're just following the guidance. Meditation is showing something, where is this? And then you question it and then you go.
Right.
But you're still on faith. That's amazing.
Everything was still on faith. And I had everybody's kids with me. And I was in charge of these teams. And I'm going into places I've never been before in my life. Well, the highlands is similar to the African bush, as it's all very poor. Lots of poverty up there, even though there's mining for gold and things like that. And it's very much run by the churches. Okay, so Papua New Guinea, they consider it like a Christian nation. But the churches run the villages. But then you also have the witch doctors. And I'm getting to my witch doctor story. But so we're getting to know locals, we're talking to different people. So how do you do that? We connect with churches, we connected with jails, we spent time in the jail up there talking to people. We just had all these unique experiences. And I was like, okay, something feels off to me here though. There's gotta be something's going on with these kids, because I would start to see girls or boys kind of spaced out, kind of looked like they had been up all night, and I was like, what were they doing all night? And again, you're in these villages where there's no supervision. Anything goes up in these villages. And so Papua New Guinea is very much, they honor the witch doctors, but there's a lot of curses and there's a lot of dark stuff especially with cannibalism, a lot of different stuff
Yeah.
that happens up there. And I went into this village with the team, and I remember these children were running away from us because they thought we were ghosts. They had never seen anybody white. And so that's awkward.
interesting.
Yes, I know.
That's awkward.
It was all a bit awkward because you're like, well, I want to talk to them. But they were running away, and we had translators, and they said, it's okay. They think you're ghosts, you know. Long story,
Wow.
I know.
That's amazing, actually. Probably
know.
scared the crap out of them.
They literally, wah! And then they would take off.
bet.
And then I would go, wah, because I didn't know I'm like, what did I do? But really, really dirt poor villages. I mean, poor villages. And so a lot of them, we would bring our little water filters. Now I'm looking now for things because I would start to see these kids that were spaced out. And so while half the team is doing water filters, I'm kind of like scouting with the other leader, and we're kind of looking around, and I'm like, let's go into this little village. Let's kind of check this out. I'm looking over, team's fine. They're doing their water program. I'm going over here. So I was starting to really use like Justice Water and these charity programs as ways to see more connections.
Identify and understand.
And see,
Especially in all these different cultures.
oh my gosh. Yes. Languages, everybody looks different, and it was crazy. I started to discover that there were a series of families that were rotating their children throughout the different villages for sex.
So they would send them to a village, and then that village would send their kids over there, and that was their sex trafficking without money.
Sometimes there was money, sometimes there was fruit or,
Trade.
vegetables, trade. So yeah, something they could trade. But the point was, everybody would come back looking spaced. And I knew drugs was involved. They chewed a lot of these red, berries. And so like their teeth were always red. Like it was, but it was a hallucinogenic that was kind of like that they would find. Yeah, they would find right in the jungle. But a lot of the kids were just jacked up, not just on that. I knew that there were designer drugs that were happening up there. There was a lot of gun running. We ended up discovering that was happening through the highlands across.
So was the gold bringing these people up there?
Yes. That's a very good point, because I was going there. So who is using these children? Okay, so you have the villages that are sharing, but it's all shameful. The villages are not gonna, they're gonna give you their child, but they're not gonna have sex with your child. That's a shameful thing. They would never do that. So a lot of the minors were involved, businessmen who were coming. And this is when I really started to see the business side of trafficking, on all different types of trafficking, because now I'm dealing with businessmen. They're there for a month to mine their company from wherever. It could be Europe, it could be, down in New Zealand and those places. It could be anywhere. The US, they come over, well, they're in the middle of nowhere and they want to be entertained. And so the villagers know, oh, they'll give me some money if I pass my children. And that was when I began to see a lot of that. And so what was happening inside of me in each of these things was like, okay, I've seen a lot. I want to do something about it. Yeah. There's always been a progression, I think, with my life where I've been through something, then I go through healing, then I have another lesson to learn, like with teaching. Then now we're traveling in different nations and I'm seeing things, I'm running into things, I'm making connections, I'm seeing New Zealand men in India, I'm seeing, so I'm starting to see that even the different nations I was in, there's like this little network that goes around, okay? They're like passing things off under the guise of business, or doctors coming in to work are sometimes traffickers. And so I was gaining a very rich knowledge base, which gave me more power when the desire came, I want to do something about this. I want to rescue now. Why do you do that? Like, honestly, I'm here doing all these little justice works. Like, who do I say? This is complex. This is very connected. What do I do? So I started looking up organizations. Some organizations had a spiritual base to them. Others did not. And they were ones who were doing something about it. They were doing it in the US. And I was like, okay, I don't want to be in the U.S. I know my time was up in the U.S. That, Spirit told me. I was like, well, where do I go? So I started to find organizations that were based in the U.S. but did work overseas, did work in different nations, all these types of things. So I got involved with a organization, and I'm not going to say the names because these organizations help rescue, and I want to keep them kind of where they're at. But I worked with an organization that was in Thailand and Cambodia. Two nations dear to my heart. Thailand is extremely dear to my heart. And I did an interview process. They asked my experience. My life obviously helped it. I'm older too, because what you will find in a lot of these movements for trafficking, or these movements to, do mission work to get out to help people, you have a lot of like young people. You've got 18 to 30. And I was working with a lot of 18 to 30, and I have no problem with that. They're passionate, they're fiery, I love that. But sometimes they need directed and they needed guided. And so these organizations I was joining were very happy that I'm an older woman, because I had life experience, I had professional experience, I've had missional experience, overseas experience. So I really became like a mentor and a mother really to a lot of the organizations that I worked with the staff that was there. Because a lot of the young people didn't know how to process their emotions. They didn't know what they were seeing.
Oh, I can only imagine.
They were cracking at the seams, and I had taught anger management, and I was the one, who knew how to kind of like, okay, we don't want to, be rageful here with these people. So I joined these organizations, and the first places I went were Thailand and Cambodia, and the focus of the nations was the same. We would work in red light districts. Now I want to explain kind of what a red light district is for those who don't know. So you can take the Las Vegas Strip, where you have strip clubs in America, and you could call that almost a red light district. But now go to a third world nation. You've got a whole lot of other mess that's happening there, because you have money coming from the tourists that are coming to the red light district. But the girls themselves don't have money. Okay, like the Las Vegas Strip, the girls are making a lot of money. Okay, they're making money. So a red light district basically is a stretch of streets. It could have multiple streets. It could be just several houses in an area. And they have a red light that comes on, and that means you're for service. So in Thailand and Cambodia, they have one of the largest red light districts. And what I mean by this is you have prostitutes that are prostituting. You have underagers that are servicing men and women and tourists, because a red light district usually is tourist driven. It's money for the nation. So Thailand has this huge one that's called the Horseshoe. And so it's in the shape of a horseshoe, and it's just buildings literally in the shape of a horseshoe. You walk into it, when you're in it, you go down this little alley and opens up, and there's the Horseshoe. And it is like tall apartment buildings where girls are just standing everywhere. Now, this was like my first introduction to an Asian red light district. I'd seen strip clubs, I had seen, village transfers, but this is where everybody is standing out like you're window shopping. I mean, literally. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like tragic. And so you have people that as you start to enter in, I have my team of people. I had teams that I felt like I could work with, teams that were safe, not teams that were going to do things, because you have to kind of lay low in these areas, because we're there to find which girls are underage, and we're there to get them out. So the organization I was working with specifically there were doing what is called hard rescues. A hard rescue is underagers. You go in, you sting operate it for a while. It usually is like several months. I mean, we were coming in after they had been there for a long time. And they would do these sting operations, and then they would do the bust, and they do a hard rescue. They pull the child, the girl, whatever, out. Immediately arrests are made. This is how it goes down. And usually all those people involved with those operations were ex-military. I worked with ex-military people. I worked with ex-policemen. I worked with current policemen. We worked with people that were in the nation itself that wanted to help with this.
And that was kind of typical, right?
It's very typical.
The ex-military and these people who want to help. So after service,
Yes. Yes.
They join the forces in underground trafficking.
Areas. Yes. And we were just a team of people that were coming in who were to look at the law of the land. And so you walk into the red light district area. There's a lot of the people greeting at the doors. Now everybody's Thai, everybody's Cambodian, except the tourists. All the tourists are tourists, okay? So there were lots of Americans, lots of British. Europe was there a lot, and there was a lot from New Zealand and Australia and all of this. And I was like, oh, I'm making the connections. And so we would go in. The Thai girls could speak English at the door, but most of the Thai girls servicing cannot. So you have really good English speakers, right? Who could say, hey, come on in, blah, blah, blah. So then they would open up a curtain, and in we would go, and it was like, wow. So you would have like Coliseum type seating. You would have girls lined up there, thousands and thousands of girls. And this red light district, this red light district alone, at the time, had 15,000 girls working. Now, when I went to the Philippines, that one had 12,000. Okay, so you're looking at this like building, rooms upon rooms upon rooms. It's like a maze as you go deeper into each they call them bars, or KTVs, which is karaoke television. So you can do karaoke in a room and a girl will come and, you're there for that. But it's like a maze. And I knew in those red light districts in Cambodia and Thailand, there was a real sense of aggression, because trafficking in itself is very controlling and dominating. You control and you take control of a person. In Asian culture, they are very subservient already by nature. So men or women who are tourists can completely get their way with whatever they want, because that's the culture. That's the culture, and it's to a fault. And so I saw a lot of like men dragging girls off stages. And I was like, this is horrible. So what our role was to explain what was happening. Here's what we're seeing. This is what we were doing. We would go in, we'd look, oh my goodness, we'd come back out. And then there would be other different streets we'd visit, which had more Western type bars, but the same stuff was happening. Same passing of money, taking girls, doing this, guys wanting young girls, guys wanting older girls, guys wanting, children they were handicapped. I remember this. There was a bar that offered handicapped prostitutes. Yes. So some people had fetishes for people who had clubbed feet, so now, like, not anger, but a real passion is in me. It's like, oh my gosh, this is, homosexuals were down there. They wanted this. They had what are called lady boys, which are, boys dressing as girls, and, they're doing transitions. And there were so many weird sexual fetishes you start to see and be around, because anything goes, and the government is all involved.
So, and that's the structure of this house. Do they have their own homes? Do they just come here for work? Or
in Thailand and Cambodia, they would have these places called stash houses, and that's where the girls would stay. It would be like a simple room with a mattress, and there you are. But they work 12 hours a day, and they cannot eat till they have serviced one man. So they're kind of standing on the stage for a long time, and then they go to the stash house, and that's where they stay. But the government's involved. Not every government official, but government's involved. It's a money maker. Police are involved, different type of things. So we would leave those areas, and we would come back, and we would say what we saw.
So where did the money go? So you have this woman in the front. She
Yes.
can speak English, so
Yes.
she's directing and she's helping assist whoever you want. And then you give her the money, or
No.
how does that all go down?
Part of the money goes to the bar, the establishment. So if someone, what they call these bar fines, and we did bar fines, actually. We were not doing anything illegal with anybody, but it was a way for us to get in. So you see a girl that you like, and you say, I would like that girl. So they shoot the little, laser up there on her number, 965. She gets off the stage, she comes. Guy says, I want to take her out. They say, you owe us money, this is a bar fine. And so then there's a certain standard of money, and it's different in every nation. So then they pay, the bar gets half, and she gets half. Now we're talking $20, really. $10, $15 maybe, max. And then she's with him all night or as many hours as he has requested. And that's what they do. Now, here's the interesting thing. In Asia, prostitution is illegal. So you don't see anything within the bar except maybe like oral sex or, a lot of makeout happening. But for prostitution to happen, it has to happen off site, because then the bar owner or the police or anyone can say, well, I don't know what happened. He took the girl, he left. I don't know what she did. Well, there's tons of hotels around these, everybody knows what's happening. But it is a highly unsafe place when a girl is bar fined, because anything can happen.
Right. I was going to say, who's accountable for her return? No one.
No one. Except for morning when she's to be back at work, or when they said she would be returned. And then that would be based on money and all of that stuff. But what I ended up starting to see was there were girls who were raped in rooms. One man would come, take the girl out, but then get her back to a room full of men, full of all sorts of people. And so Thailand and Cambodia, I saw a lot of, it was very aggressive. It was a lot of violence, much more lack of care, if there is such a thing, lack of care. I would see men drag girls by their hair. I would see them throw them up against the wall if they said, my heel, I need to take off my heel, my feet are hurting. So I saw a lot of bad stuff. So we would report it back to the people who had been doing this sting operation, and then they would do what they would do.
But it still would take a couple months.
Correct.
Set the sting up.
Totally.
So you're taking the girls or whomever out of the situation and doing the bust at the same time, and you're getting the people bar owners.
Sometimes.
Who's being arrested?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was bar owners. Sometimes it could be family, especially if family has like a certain reputation. It could be anybody, tourists, all of that. Especially because we were dealing with underagers. Right. Now, when you're dealing with 18 above, that's a little bit different, and that will be the next nation I'll go into if you'd like me to. But the hard rescues were operation. Before we even get there, they know the clubs, they're posing as tourists, they're getting to know the girls, and then they would tell us where to go. We'd go in, we'd get to know different people, we'd report back, and then they would do it, and then we'd move. So
you're just acting like you're a customer.
Totally.
You're having to go in there
Totally.
and act like nothing's up.
Nothing's up. And it's so interesting being a woman in a situation like this, because most times it's men. Mm-hmm. But I would see, different, female businesswomen that would go. It was interesting because it took a while, because they always thought I was there for prostitution. So they would always be like, hey, do you want this girl? And I was like, no, I don't want this girl. And I basically learned how each nation operated with its trafficking and who to target in these bars, these red lights, these brothels, in order to get to the girls. Because ultimately you want the girls out. But a red light district is run by everybody. So the bar owners, the DJs, the mama-sans, which is the term for the woman who is in charge of the women who are dancing, the women who are servicing. She's called a mama-san. So I got to know the mama-sans. I got to know the DJs. This was what I did first. I got to know the waitresses, because the waitresses seat me. The waitresses know all the girls. So if you want to get to know a place like that, you actually want to interact and be involved. And so I did. And so I became good friends with mama-sans. I became good friends with, police. I had different, people that would say, hey, if you need a ride back from the red light, we'll take you. People knew over time that I treated the girls well. I was not there for sex. And they didn't know why I was there, but they would just, allow me. They gave me privileged seating at one point. I remember I was in different places, and they would be like, we'll put you in the VIP. And then I come up and there's all these businessmen, and I'm like the only woman. And I'm kind of like, here I am, And I got to know the girls so much that I just basically did life with them, which is, I believe, the way to approach dealing with this type of situation is immerse yourself if you feel you're called to do that. Don't do it if you don't. But I could switch off really when I was in there, and I just was myself for real. But I was just, my own history helped me navigate those places.
Did you ever feel threatened at any time? Was there, I mean, because that's, with a lot of violence going on, it was just to the girls or, you know, to anyone who's servicing, but did you ever feel like there was a threat?
Yes and no. There was a lot of drunkenness. I never drank while in these red light districts because I knew to keep my wits about me. I could have, but I chose not to do that. So there was a lot of like stupid drunkenness type stuff where men would kind of come over and they'd be like, hey, what are you doing here? And they'd kind of like, you know, see like, could they get something from you? But they were so inebriated, and I would just laugh. And I had gotten to know the waitresses so much that the waitresses would move them on. So I got to know people in each bar that I would be in, that I spent a lot of time in, who acted as my eyes and ears at points as well. And they would cover me extremely well. They would put me in places like, you don't want to be by that guy, we'll take you over here. So even though there was a level of heightened awareness, you know, they say humans live on different awareness levels. We can live on 3 awareness levels. We can live on oblivious, where like you don't know anything's happening. You can be on a heightened awareness, which you kind of know things are happening, and then you can be on like a code red, kind of a severe awareness, where you're just totally overcome by whatever situation that's there, and you're really aware and everything. I pretty much was on a level 2 the whole time. I had fun in these places, and when I mean fun, I don't mean I liked what I saw, but I would get to know people, and we laughed and we joked, and
You did. I like how you described it. You did life with them.
I just did life, and that was it. And so I just kept my awareness about me. I looked around, especially if I was leading a team, because I did a lot of teams wanted to come through and see how it worked. And so then I would be a little bit more like, I'm kind of watching how this is going on over here with this young kid. I wonder what's happening, And I would just, if I felt like the bar was unsafe, I would step out. I would say, we're not going into that one. And
had a lot of intuition, right?
Everything was intuition.
You had to have gone with your gut, because how would you know? You wouldn't have.
No, you wouldn't. And I'm surrounded by all different languages. I got Koreans, French, Thai, Cambodian. I've just got, and then there's English, so you're kind of like looking for the English person you can talk to. But it was good. That was my time in Thailand and Cambodia. And then I would see during that time as well, there were rescues that happened, but I also went to safe houses. So safe houses is what happens after you rescue a girl. And because these were underagers that they were rescuing a lot, the safe houses were hours and hours away from anything. There would be counseling that was happening, different inner healing, a lot of releasing of dark energies, dark emotions was happening.
Immense, I'm sure.
We used a lot of creativity with the girls. Painting, we would turn on a song and we would just have them paint their feelings. And some of them were the most incredible artists I'd ever seen. As you started to get to know the girls in the safe houses, because we didn't work with the immediate rescued, they needed time. We would work with the ones that had already been there for a while. They would tell us their dreams. Some wanted to be a doctor. Some wanted to work in a call center. For them, that was, just money, and it was an up from what they were doing.
It was normal life.
Totally. A lot wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
And some were. Some of the girls had gotten pregnant, and they had babies, and usually they're taken out of red light at that point. So they have their baby, and then they can come back with their baby, which is a whole unique experience.
Yeah.
I know.
We went there. We went there for a moment. Now, that's crazy still to me that they're doing that. But you know what? Why don't we approach that? You did tell me a story of, a woman who had her child right inside the bar.
Right inside the bar, and it would be under the bed where she was servicing men. That's where it would sleep. So yes, there was definitely some crazy things, but the positive things was I did see in Thailand and Cambodia, I did see restoration happen. amongst girls that just blessed my heart. I saw them learn English. I saw them start to dream, have dreams, go after their dreams. We helped build a salon for one of the girls. We painted in pink because that's what their salons are, in pink. And she was really gifted in hair, and she got her license. We helped her get her license, and she's now running a very successful business that way. And I know for me, so I always had like a two-part thing, especially with Thailand and Cambodia. You go in where they're all trapped, everything's hell, it's madness, but then we can go see the safe houses and we can see progress.
Run us through what that looks like. So, I mean, at this time, these girls just think you're there. They don't know who you are.
Right.
And then when the sting operation happens,
we're gone. We're already gone.
You're already gone. So
we've been gone for a couple weeks.
So then this is when these men, these wonderful people, men and women, who are ex-military or ex-police, anyone who's choosing to do this, and you would have to be trained, I would imagine.
Totally,
so
totally.
You can
and
see why this would be.
There's a lot of legality.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. So you guys know that this sting is going to happen on this day, so you leave the scene.
Oh, for weeks ahead of time.
Oh,
so
interesting.
That we're gone.
So they don't ever connect.
No, there's not a connection piece that's made.
So weeks at a time you leave, and then this sting happens. And do you do they go in and take the girls?
I just know that they go in and they take the girls. I know nothing.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know anything after that.
But you
will hear it on the news sometimes. I remember there were 22 underage girls found in Manila in the Philippines, and we had just been down in there, but we had been there a month prior. We're gone long before then, but they don't release that information to us.
Very interesting. So,
and then there are teams of lawyers too. Okay, so we also worked with an organization, I cannot say the name, but it's a team of lawyers that also there will be prosecutions that will happen. So the whole rescue operation is advanced. We just kind of act like the tourists for a few weeks, okay? We're eyes, but really they've been doing this a long time. So we're just kind of there to give any extra information. And then they do their rescue, however that looks. They take the girls to these spaces, which we don't even know where the rescued homes were, because we couldn't be involved with that either. We could only go now to the safe houses, which was, the place where all the restoration and healing was happening. But I know during those times they would be talking to lawyers if people wanted to prosecute. Obviously tourists would put up a fight, right? Or somebody would put up a fight. So they had these trained lawyers who, that's what they did. And they would work alongside the sting operation. We're out of the picture. I'm now down somewhere else in another part of the nation. And I'm going, I wonder how it's going. But I'm in the safe houses and looking at the girls that had been rescued and hearing their stories and hearing their songs, and they would play instruments. Some were incredible writers. And I would get to see the side of them being children again, because in a red light, you learn too quickly. Okay, you're an adult way beyond your time. You shouldn't be learning half this stuff. And so I remember just seeing the restoration, and it was incredible.
They could finally be
they were playing with baby dolls, or they were playing kickball, or they were, not crying anymore, or they were sleeping, okay? Because a lot of them didn't sleep, you're up and I remember not sleeping too when I was all involved. So to be able to see that was great, but to also know that a bust was happening over here was equally invigorating, because I was like, this is good. Yeah. This is good.
Yeah, because that had to have been a little, you would have to find your way with the part where you don't get to see the bus. You kind of just leave the scene and then hope that it happens. Or,
right.
I mean, if no one's telling you, right? Like, you watch the news, but is it always reported?
No, it's not always reported. But, I knew that things were happening.
Right.
I would know. And I had some friends, too, who would just say, yep, it happened. And that was all I knew.
All you knew.
I
Yeah.
knew. And I'm like, okay, all right, this is great, And sometimes I wouldn't even know who they were rescuing because we were talking to so many. They were targeting certain ones too, as well. So I could have been easily talking to those very girls or boys.
Was it kind of where one bar would specialize in the younger girls, or was it just didn't matter?
Thailand was this was Thailand and Cambodia. It was very different. There would be kind of a conglomerate. If you know anything about Asian culture, they always look younger
Yeah.
than they are. And so it was always, you had to try to figure out, is that an underage girl or is that girl 20? But she looks like she's 13, And so they would have a mixture of it. But there were a lot of side streets where a lot of crazy stuff in unsafe, unsanitized areas were happening with underagers. So sometimes underagers would be on side streets or they would be mixed in with the bar. And that was what my job was, to kind of like try to see, like, is that an underager? Like, how old are you? And they always say, I'm 20 or I'm 25. And sadly, sometimes that's the case, and other times, no, you're 13. And so we were given tips on what to look for and what could be possibly an underage girl. You knew which girls were new, and those were the ones we were targeting a lot because they were unsure of themselves on the stage. They were unsure with customers. They were frightened more. You could just see it as they're all carded up there with their numbers, standing in bikinis, and that in itself. Somebody says, somebody once tried to tell me, well, it's not that bad because they're wearing bikinis. And I remember saying, but in an Asian culture, that is shame. Like, we wear bikinis over here, okay, but over there, we had to wear, we had to have shirts that came to here. I had to not have shorts that were like, above my knees. I had to honor the culture that was there. And so for them, that's so shameful. And so we saw, a lot. I just saw a lot.
Going back to the you were talking about the younger kids being in the alley. So
Yes.
So was someone pointing these customers that way and saying, you go, if you want this age range, you go to that alley?
Absolutely.
Oh, geez.
Absolutely. Yep, that's it, exactly.
And what ages are we speaking?
Oh, it could be any. You could have 5-year-olds. You could have 10, all the way up to 17, or under 17. Yeah,
Wow, 5-year-old.
5-year-olds,
That's crazy.
and they're just behind a curtain. So you would move the curtain, and there they are, sitting there on a little bed, well, cot, kind of like I don't even know what you would call it. Sometimes just on a mattress that was like this thin, just sitting there waiting, and you'd watch, grown men go in.
So sad. So young. So crazy.
So broken. Yeah, they are so broken. I mean, it's like when I talk about the soft rescues, the hard rescues. The kids are just so gone. I mean, at the age of 5, going through all the things that they're going through, like they are mentally broken, emotionally broken, spiritually broken. Like their whole soul is broken.
Well, they never had a life. I mean,
No.
you got to realize. So who's putting these kids out there? Is it the family?
It can be families. It can be a bunch of runaway kids. I mean, like runaways. I mean, that was my thing. I got into that party scene because, I wasn't home all the time. You know what I mean? I was out and about. And so there's a lot of orphans running the streets. I mean, you have tourists who've come who impregnate a girl and she doesn't want the baby, so she leaves it on the street. And then that baby grows up with, it's like this vicious cycle. So a lot of it's runaway kids that they target because they're really easy. There's no family. And then if there is family, they do a lot of, they go out, and this is the same everywhere. This is the same in all Asian countries. They send the boy out, or, this good looking man who goes out and starts grooming the villages. And they start looking for who is really desperate, who's willing to sell their child, who's willing to show me their girls, who's willing to do this. And they groom them, tell them they're going to get a great job. We're going to give them an education. We're going to do all these things. The parents need the money. Parents fork over the money. The guy takes the girls. And there starts their life. And they never become what they say, like, we're going to give them a good job. No, they become the side alleyway behind, the curtain.
Is there imports, meaning do you see them bringing in busloads of new people and they're from somewhere else? Or is this literally just off from their villages?
A lot of it's from the villages because that's quick and easy to find. But there's girls all over the world. All over the world. When I worked in the Philippines, and there's two other places we'll talk about, the Philippines, and then I'll talk about what happened with me in Amsterdam, just to show a dichotomy here between the two. But in the Philippines, you had Hawaiian girls, so you had girls from the U.S., but Hawaii, you had Hawaiian. You had girls being trafficked from New Zealand into the Philippines. You had girls coming from Indonesia. You had girls coming from Korea. You had girls coming from Europe. You had all sorts of different girls that were coming into these nations. So it's not just within the nation that they're finding them. You are finding them from all over.
It's a hub. So they're bringing them in from...
It's huge. And red light districts bring thousands of girls at a time. So when I went to the Philippines, I did what were called soft rescues, and that's now working with 18 to 35. So it's girls that are of age. Same thing, prostitution's not allowed. Same thing, bar fines. Same thing where everybody's, being sold, and sex is happening and abuse is happening. But the interesting thing with the Philippines was their red light district is really much like a party scene. So I never, ever felt uncomfortable ever. I saw a few things of violence happen, but for the most part, the violence didn't happen in the red light district. And so it was a happy place. I mean, it's going to sound really, really kind of crazy, but, we were allowed to go up on the stage. We sometimes would dance with the girls on the stage. Sometimes we would, sit around and order pizza and we'd eat and we'd have all these, and so it was very much a relaxed atmosphere. It was a fun atmosphere. It was a party atmosphere. Whereas in Thailand, you kind of walked in, you're aware. But here in the Philippines, you walk in, you go, hey, everybody, how's it going? And then everyone goes, hey, and so you have all these girls are on stage and you're talking to all the tourists. You're having a party, basically, is what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Same process, a girl you like, you take off the stage and you begin to talk. And so that one was really developing. I developed incredible relationships with the girls in the Philippines, because they were 18 to 35. They were older. Now, there were underage stuff happening there, but that was not why I was there. This time I was on the other side doing soft rescues, working with girls that were of age and older. And so I was just having another experience, right? Where the spirit is just putting me in all these places. So I had girls over to my apartment. I got to know them. I'd let them cook in my apartment because I had a stove. Sometimes I'd let them take showers. I really did life with them. I got to know them. We'd go to the salon together. We'd eat lunch together. I'd meet them at spaces and places and just get to know them. And then when I felt that it was time to see if they wanted to come out, I would give them a little card. And on the card had the organization's name, which I cannot say, but had the organization's name, but then also had some girls that were rescued out and their little mobile numbers. And so then they could talk, they could say, hey, I worked in that same bar as you.
That was well thought out.
It was extremely well thought out. And so the girls would, I would say, they would contact the girls in the organization a lot. They would talk in Tagalog because I didn't understand it. And then they would meet at my apartment. And then the girls would, a lot of times, come with, the girl that was there who said, I used to be in this. See, I have my little ID that showed I worked here. And it was very beautifully planned. Beautifully planned. Because now you're getting the Filipino people involved. You're getting, their own nation involved. Sometimes that's just easier.
Right.
But I was still doing the same thing, going in, acting as a tourist. But this time talking to girls and getting to know them a lot. Getting to have them over, because I could. Bar find a lot of girls to get them out and let them sleep at my apartment just so that they could sleep and have a hot, something in the morning and feel normal. So that one was really, for me, I lived in the city. I was 4 blocks from the red light district, and I lived in a building that was full of tourists. So I was now doing life very differently, whereas in Thailand and Cambodia, I was living off the place. I wasn't immersed. I would live with the teams I was with, and we'd be way over here. Whereas in the Philippines, I lived in the cities. And I lived smack dab. I had my own apartment. I had it all. You know, I was there doing life in the Philippines. But my work was to get to know these girls and turn them into, you know, to different organizations that benefited them. And I did. And there were 70 girls that that this organization had helped get out. They also had safe houses. I worked in the safe houses, you know, did inner healing counseling, did creativity, did music, hung out with them, ate with them. This organization provided college degrees and high school certificates.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And the U.S. paid, you know, for that. The donors of the organization paid for that.
So these soft rescues were probably a little bit easier even in the healing because they were older. They made a decision because they had to make a decision
Sure.
to come out,
Sure.
right? Because that's the difference
Correct.
between a hard and
That's
a
correct.
soft rescue. So, so they're already making the decision. It's not like you're dragging someone out.
No, they're making the decision to come, but the organization also said you can go back too, you know, so because they're adults. And so you let them make the decision. And sometimes you would see that. Sometimes they would be like, I need money for my family, because in Asian culture, they're responsible for their parents and they owed a little bit of money, and they're like, I need more money, you know, here. And this organization was helping get college educations for them to get them to a better job. But that meant time waiting and, you know, so.
Right.
So some things, but I did, yeah. Some of it was easier, and then I don't know if I could even put an easier on it, because sometimes what was hard with the soft rescues is you would see the older sisters convincing the younger sisters, you know, to be in this type of work, and that was very, very hard for me to see. When I would see 2 sets of twins or sisters or somebody, you know, my sister's in this bar and then my twin sister's over here and then my other relatives over here. And so I saw a lot of like family cooperation, which was hard.
Well, and their reality is different, right? Over there.
Completely.
So it's the only way to make money they see. They
That's
don't
correct.
see another way.
That's right.
So it is their culture in that respect. Do you think that besides what it is, that's exactly what happened to you? It was your sister.
It was my sister.
So this was
Yes, actually.
probably personal.
Yes, it was. It was. Sometimes I would cry over it because I would see the same manipulation happening, and I would be like, "You're being manipulated." "Oh no, Mama, you know, Ate loves me," and I'm like, "No, no," you know. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I would have to have this knowledge held inside my own self and my own soul, and realize that sometimes it would be received, sometimes it would not.
Well, if they admitted that this is what their family was doing, that's almost in their minds that could be an admittance to they don't love me, they're
Correct.
using me, and so that might be
And there's so much
worse
shame
than
culture.
that, doing worse than what their job is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a high shame culture. They are shamed like for everything. So they always want to do right. They always want to do what the elder says. You know, sometimes, you know, being an American, you know, we can be more forward. And this is something I think like I learned while being over there too, was to not shove even my truth or what was right on anybody, because I'm coming up against generational mindsets and beliefs.
No, I can imagine.
And so that was hard, because I would see people stay in their victimization longer than they needed to. You know, and I was like, you don't need to be in this, you know?
Well, maybe they didn't even see it as victimization, you know, that this is what the family business is, or this is how you
And
make
that's
money
true.
here.
That's true.
So,
That's true. But once they did see it, and once they realized their life could change and they were actually going to get a college degree and they were in a safe house and they had 3 meals a day, once they saw it and they started experiencing healing, then those same girls would go with our teams back in, and they would help talk to these girls.
Wow.
And all of these things. And so it was powerful.
They had to see hope.
Oh, definitely.
Because you can't make those types of leaps without knowing there's a net.
Exactly.
And they probably wouldn't.
Right.
And I'm sure this organization was the net.
The organization was the net. It was the fast net, actually. Because I found with other organizations within the city I was in that were Filipino run, even though this one is Filipino run that I worked with, there was still an American component. There was so much red tape. There was so much shame that certain organizations, I remember I would get these girls out, and then it was like they wanted to go to this organization and there was so much shame over it that, like, even sometimes the Filipino social workers or different things that I saw within not the organization I was working for, I would see them shame the girls, and and the girls were just like, we're not going there. And so where'd they go? They'd head back to the bars. And so sometimes I had to work through a school. There was this school, it was an incredible school, but they would turn away sometimes girls that I would bring because they're like, well, we don't usually have these type of girls from that place. We would help the at-risk over here, but not from that place. And it was like, so the organization I worked for was a fast track. You could fast track the girls that wanted to go.
I see. Wow. What was your next country?
And then the last area would be Europe, and Europe is a whole different ballgame in itself. I spent time in Spain. I was just in all sorts of different countries, but I'm going to focus in on one because I want to show something with this. So I spent time in Amsterdam. Amsterdam has one of the oldest red light districts in the world. It's called the De Wallen. It is a series of streets and a series of windows. Not like the red light districts of Asia. So now we're in a little bit more upscale. Okay, things, look a little bit better, I guess you could say.
Is prostitution legal there?
Prostitution is legal. Prostitution, they have their own committee that works for them, and they're able to say what they want to see happen in the red light district. They call the shots on prices. So the girls consider themselves very liberated there. Okay, they will say that they're liberated, they love what they do, blah, blah, blah. So I went because I've always wanted to go to Amsterdam, and I was with another organization, and we were just learning about trafficking in this organization in Europe and what this looks like, and a lot of girls from Eastern Europe are trafficked through, and what does this all look like? So I go down into the Douala, totally different atmosphere completely. It's very liberal. There's a lot of the women there's a feminism to them that is like, I'm in charge of my body, I'm in charge of the prices, I'm in charge of my window, and this is how it goes, which is opposite of Asia. Yeah. Okay, totally the opposite. So they have this huge statue that's dedicated to the prostitute, and all this, and it's a tourist spot where tourists can come to, and when I mean tourists, sex tourism is there, yes. People are going and having sex, but a lot of these women are older, 18 on up. The oldest was 75, and I saw her, and and she had been doing it since she was 18 and was very proud, and wow. They called her the Jezebel, who controlled all of Douala. But anyway, so in these places you would see a lot of tourist families come through, there would be people out there with these with these microphones, and here we are in the Douala, and we are in the Asian section, and there would be Asian women that are standing there in the windows.
So this is street level.
Street level, eye level, yes. All right. And then you could look up and you could see more up there, but it was not at all like Asia. So little kids are there with their families. And they're walking through, and the boys are looking, and the girls are waving, and I'm just like, this is so insane. Like, what am I
It's
seeing?
a little different.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very, very different. I would see a lot of haggling happen when the guy would come up. He would knock on the door, and she'd just open it a crack. She'd stand there like this, and she'd say, "What is it that you want?" And then they would be negotiating prices. And if she didn't like them, she'd shut the door in his face, and then he'd get mad.
Oh, they were really in control then.
Oh yes, and so I would see this all happen, and I thought, wow, this is just bizarre. And then I would go down different streets, and they had all sort of different nationalities present. You had Eastern Europe, you had all of these things, and I thought, well, we're here learning about trafficking in the city, so there has got to be trafficking here. Because what I'm seeing is very liberated. It's okay. It's legal. It's prostitution's legal. It's no big deal. Whatever. And then they brought in a police officer who worked with the trafficking wing in the Dewallen red light, and it turns out there is trafficking. Now the trafficking is a different face completely. It's usually not underage. There are some underage, but it's usually not. It's women who are pimped out from like Romania into Amsterdam. Women who are pimped from France into Amsterdam. Because Amsterdam is known for this. It's just known for this big red light. And so they're controlled by a pimp. Now, even though prostitution is legal, what I mean by them being controlled was our job was to take little bowls of soup, and we would go to the girls in the windows and we would give them soup. But because I had become aware that there are pimps, I started to become aware of what was around me more. And I would start to see men, and Amsterdam is a lot of water, so there's bridges, and it's really a beautiful city, similar to Venice. And I would start to see men smoking cigarettes and standing on different bridges and watching certain windows. And I was like, oh, I'm noticing something, like what's happening. If we stayed with the girl too long, our conversations were interrupted. And I was like, by the pimp.
Oh. Get back to work.
Get back to work. You're not allowed to continue to stand there. Thanks for the soup, and move on. It was very rough. It was just like, move on, like get out.
So these are women who were trafficked.
Yes.
To Amsterdam. Was it all sorts of stories as far as were they kidnapped? Were they?
Some girls said that they were just told they had good work opportunities. This is the pitch. This is the pitch. And you're looking at if you're looking at Eastern Europe, okay, I have friends that work right now in a nation in Eastern Europe, and it's poor. It's dirt poor. What are these girls going to do in some of these gypsy villages? Okay, they go after the gypsies because the gypsies are roamers, right? They're the travelers. They're kind of like the runaways, the ones that are on the street, and they offer this life. And so they're coming to a big city. They're coming to a popular city. They're coming to a wealthy city. They didn't make a lot of money themselves, but they were then controlled by this pimp. Right. And that's the trafficking that happened there. Even though prostitution was legal, even though what they were doing was legal in the sense of prostitution, the fact was the money went to the pimp and it went somewhere else, the money. And the girls were shifted a lot. So there is a trafficking wing that works there. And I started to see a lot of that. I was not involved in any rescues there. Basically, it was an opportunity for me to see how a red light district in Europe functions. And I saw the same thing in Sweden. I saw the same thing in Norway. I saw the same thing in France, Germany. Same type, a liberated type of woman.
Because it's legal.
Because it's legal. But then there would be this undercurrent of control and manipulation by pimps.
Yeah. Well, wherever the red light is, right?
Right.
It can't all be, because there's a need.
Yeah, there is.
Someone's going to pay.
Yeah. For
that service.
Mm-hmm. I know. Now I know that they have been shutting down some of the different. They're not called bars, but the windows in Amsterdam. Some of them are being shut down. There are some things that are happening, which is really, really good. And I was there in 2017. And so that's not long ago. And they were already starting to make some busts happen. I never saw them happen. I just had that one day where we were enlightened by this man who works with the trafficking wing. And he said, keep your eyes out, look for this. So you would see girls going on boats, going by, different things like that. There was a lot of meeting outside the city for those type of girls too.
Like they would be taken from their window basically,
right, and out.
yeah.
Yeah, because the pimp then was in control of the
Yeah.
girl. But a normal girl standing in the window, she wouldn't leave.
How many countries have you been in?
37
37 countries.
in 4 continents.
How many organizations?
I would say 11, 10.
We do not know this as people who have normal lives here in America. We are not privy to this information, really. I just found out how bad trafficking is. And shocked. First, you bring this information to us, but hopefully we understand some of how, I mean, this is the world. There's probably not a country, a village that this isn't happening in. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. I would wager that guess is true.
Follow the money,
Follow the money,
because this is,
follow the politics,
yeah,
follow the schools. You know,
follow the schools. Let's talk about that.
it can be within the schools as well. You know, it can come across as sexual abuse. Teachers need to have their eyes opened more. They need to, they're suspecting something. They're mandated reporters. That's what a school teacher is. They're mandated to report, you know, possible abuse. Check if teachers are doing pornography. You know, have the computers checked and wiped and cleaned, because I know that there were stories in different states where teachers were watching pornography or students were sending in photographs of themselves to different teachers, and it goes down into the dark web. Like, and I don't know the rights and privileges of that. I'm sure there's probably something like you can't look at someone's computer, but there needs to be a more proactive stance, because the world as a whole, and we can look at America, is very pornography driven. It is a big moneymaker on every level, every corporate levels, down to religion. You know, religion can be involved in pornography. I mean, you saw all the sexual abuse that came out of the Catholic Church. Okay, like this pornography, this entity, it's almost like an entity is the way that I can describe it, like a really dark energy
Yeah.
that just is weaving its way.
I'm going to agree with you. That's how I feel. Like it has this life of its own. It's a whole thing that drives the money, drives the people. And yes, I mean, you know, even you, and you even said when you were trafficked that you service clergy.
That's
this
correct.
is all across the board.
All across the board. And it's every, you know, all races. It goes across every socioeconomic background. It's not limited. And that's what makes it such a difficult thing to crack. But I know that things are happening.
Yes. Yeah, no, I do too. And let's let that be the next discussion. Let's get down to what is going on right now. We talked about, I believe we talked about the current administration.
Yes.
Never before have I seen a president focus in on crimes against humanity, period.
That's correct.
I believe, and I did not check, and I was going to fact check this. Well, we know one of the first executive orders was about human trafficking. If you get caught human trafficking, we seize your assets. But I believe, maybe you even said this, there is actually 9 executive orders.
There are 9 executive orders that have gone out. Yes.
Against crimes against humanity, not just human trafficking.
Yeah, not just human trafficking, but crimes against humanity. Yes.
That's amazing.
People just need to go and read the executive orders that have been signed. I like President Trump's bold stance on this.
It is bold. No one has done this.
Not at all. Not at all.
And we're seeing the bust.
Oh, I know we are. I know. I mean, there were some in Texas, and then there was Georgia, another big bust. There was a bust on the Mexican-U.S. border with both sides, working together. And yes, and we're going to continue to see the Epstein takedown is massive, massive, massive. With as many nations as I was in, and as many places I've been, I've wondered now, looking back at Epstein, if I had seen any of people that were involved with, his stuff. Which I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised. That was a major, right? That had to have been a major world hub. We know it was. There was girls shipped in from all over the world.
Yes.
And we know underage.
Yeah, I know.
Those pilots did not report, but people were seeing small children, 10, 12 years old, getting off planes.
I know.
On that, that's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. And it happens all over the world too, though. Like even on basic American Airlines, Delta. I mean, I'm not just saying these are the ones involved. I'm just saying they're using airlines all over the world to traffic girls. I read, it was a couple months ago, where an airline stewardess, they're now teaching all the airline stewardesses and the flight attendants how to spot trafficking.
Awareness.
Be aware of what's around you. And flight attendants are actually, turning people in or being whistleblowers. Yeah, they're being whistleblowers, and I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
We all have to be aware.
Yes.
I mean, we don't realize that. And we'll talk about this later, but I do want to talk about it in our own town. But going back to, these busts, I mean, one of the things I've been seeing, and I've kind of been geeky, when I've watched the earthquakes, but I'm seeing things that look like earthquakes, but they are not. So I'm hearing these rumors of, once they get these kids out of these tunnels, or not even out of the tunnels, but these tunnels that are used for trafficking, because they're saying they're all over, that they're having to demolish them. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that. I mean, that's on my radar personally, just watching that kind of stuff. One thing I did not know, the wall, and I was like, what's up with this wall?
Yes.
Well, now I know what's up with the wall.
What's up with the wall?
First of all, it goes down several feet into the ground. No tunnels. You'd have to bore earth. Yep. I don't know how far those go down. I did not know that. Second of all, you might get one jumper across that fence, but you're not going to get a truckload.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
And that was probably, I mean, I don't know if you ever said it because I wasn't listening back then, to be honest. Is that, what a great help. He's not trying to keep people out of the country. He's trying to keep the human trafficking from stopping into the U.S. because it's such a big deal.
It is a big deal on the Mexican border, along with gun running and a whole bunch of other things, and drugs. And everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. And it all goes together. It all goes together. Where there's drug dealing, there's going to be human trafficking. Where there's human trafficking, there's going to be gun running. It's supply and demand. It's all supply and demand.
Someone said follow the money.
Yep.
Follow the drugs, because that's what you're going to do. If you follow the money, you're going to find the drugs. And if you find the drugs, you're going to find the humans. And if you find the humans, you're going to find the guns.
That's correct.
And that's exactly what I've always heard. Well, always heard meaning just recently, since I woke up to this issue. Mm-hmm. So when I look back on this now, knowing what I know now, and I'm putting all these things together, it really looks like we have an administration that's saying this will be no longer.
That's the feel
as much as possible. We're not going to be able to stop everything.
No, but I'm sensing a zero tolerance policy coming with this one. Yeah. I sense that with President Trump. This is not a knock on any of the other administrations, but we needed somebody who was going to be a bull in a china cabinet.
Yeah.
To deal with issues of of human trafficking. Like, it just, crimes against humanity, you have to have a bull in the china cabinet. You can't have somebody who can be swayed by money. Can't have somebody who wants their position so much so that they're willing to, like, crush the little man, you know. He's doing this. He chose to be president, really. Mm-hmm. President Trump chose to be president.
Yeah, he did. He would have had
and
to.
And he loves our nation, and he's very gifted in knowledge of economics around the world. He's the perfect man to have to deal with human trafficking and issues of sex trafficking.
Yeah. No, I now see it. I did not. I didn't.
It's okay.
Be honest, I did not see this.
It's okay.
Didn't I? I woke up to this.
That's okay.
You know, but then when I look back, and look at what his platform was and what he's done, that's a whole thing. You can talk and get up there and say whatever you want to in your bullhorn.
That's correct.
But I want to see what you've done.
Yeah.
And when that's where I started. I didn't know he did all this. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Amazing.
And, you know, there are rumors that our money is going to change. Our money system is going to change. And if we go digital, now this is really interesting. If we go digital money, there are no more crimes because your money is digital.
Yeah.
How are you going to get that money into your account? So that, I mean, I'm just putting food for thought because these things are being rumored heavily that we're going to have this new system. And so, and this is worldwide. And if what I'm hearing is if the countries decide not to go on this quantum financial system, you don't get to play ball. Which is really interesting, which is going to encourage a lot of countries to do this. So that is another thing that is going to help human trafficking.
That will affect trafficking.
It's going to, yeah, because the money is no more cash. The cash does you no good.
That's right.
Zero. And if you're a tourist and you don't want your wife to find out, you are definitely not going to be using your quantum financial system.
No, you are not.
So it's going to be very interesting to see what really happens. Yeah, I mean those are rumors.
Right.
I don't know.
I hear you.
But
Nice rumor.
it would be very interesting, right? Because that would really, you know, if cash is no longer and you're dealing under the table, how are you ever going to get that money into your account? They will be able to track where it came from.
That's
and
really,
who, it's markings, right? You will never be able to hide. So for the people who are doing the crimes, that's going to make it really tough.
Yep.
Now let's talk about our local area.
Okay.
I said to you, you know, I'm just keeping my ears and eyes open, and a lot of this can be total rumors. I don't know, but I'm definitely intuitive enough to say, is this right? And I was feeling this is absolutely right on. That these tunnels run everywhere.
Okay. Yep.
And I was shown a map, and we have our own little tunnel, local tunnel here. It was up in the Thumb area, up in Michigan. And in Michigan, up in the Thumb area.
Right.
See, when you live in Michigan, it's right there,
right.
Which is awesome. And when I had said this to you, you said it's everywhere, anywhere. And what did you say? Where was it? In our local mall.
The Great Lakes Mall.
I mean, right here. We're a very small town.
Yeah. You want to look at the Great Lakes Mall. I wouldn't be surprised if it's already, under investigation. But yeah, the Great Lakes Mall, strip malls, everywhere. Outlets.
And what does that mean? Does that mean people are looking to take people or
there could be
them
some
out?
of that. No. There could be, takes, okay, because, child kidnapping. But usually a place like Great Lakes Mall is a transit spot. So you have where it originated from, then they're in transit being trafficked, and then they're sent to their destination point. And so a mall is an easy drop-off place because there's lots of people. Well, not now with COVID, but there's lots and lots of people. You got big parking lots. And so you can make quick transfers in and out of vans, out of cars really easily and just keep them going. So you could have somebody who wants to get into Canada, let's say, and they'll do it through the Great Lakes Mall maybe. Or they'll do it somewhere close to the border where there's enough people traffic happening, where there's enough people roaming around, but it's such a big space that it's hard to monitor it.
Yeah.
So yeah, malls, gas stations, rest areas are another one on interstates. I was driving recently and I went on a 4-hour trip, and so I went to a rest area. I didn't see anything, but I had the sense, I kind of had this feeling because a lot of truckers pull their trucks in, and I just had a feeling while I was standing there. I think this rest area feels, like something has happened with truckers. Mm-hmm. And truckers have their own way of, communicating on their CB radios, and they've got a lot.
Yeah, and that's another.
It is. That's a huge trafficking area.
Yeah, it's
huge trafficking.
Crazy.
Huge.
They have their own language over
yes,
the CB.
They do.
They're ordering before they get there.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
Anything else you want to share?
I think I would want people to become awakened and aware that this could be happening in your backyard. Sexual abuse alone, without money involved, without anything, is evil and twisted. And if sexual abuse is happening in a house, let's say, with a family or whoever, you're already setting up that girl or boy who is being abused to be trafficked later, because they're they're being awakened to all sorts of different things. Their resistance to fight back goes away. Their voice is taken. All these things happen, and then you will have the trafficker that could meet them at the Great Lakes Mall. And so there is a very huge connection between sexual abuse just in a family or in a neighbor or whatever, to them eventually possibly even being trafficked, because the resistance is down. Their spirit is broken. And so I would tell people to wake up, to look around. If you see suspicious activity, there are trafficking hotlines you can call. You can call the police. You can call anybody that you feel like you're to call, because there are spaces and places where people want to help. And they're anonymous calls. You don't have to reveal yourself. It's safe for you, because sometimes people are like, well, what can I do? What if they come to kill me? That's very rare, very, very rare. Your calls are all anonymous.
I think we wanted to hear, that would never happen. No, it's rare.
It's rare. I have to be honest, okay?
Well, if it's an anonymous tip, it's not like...
It's like an anonymous tip. You're saying, I see something in the Great Lakes Mall on Saturday. Something doesn't look right. Can, check it out.
Right.
And so just be aware. Be more observant. Watch.
People wake up.
Yeah. Wake up.
That's
it. Yes, please.
Wake up. This stuff goes on
and on. Yes.
And it's in our own towns.
Yes.
Abuse is everywhere. I mean,
yes.
I would have to say, I don't know what they used to say as far as the percentage of people being sexually abused, but I'm going to say it's underestimated. It's only underestimated because there's so many that are not speaking about it.
That's correct.
There are not, now, as an intuitive healer, I have not found many who have not been sexually abused.
Right.
It would be abnormal.
Yes.
And that's crazy for me to say that, but it would be abnormal for me to see someone who has not been sexually abused. That's how bad this is. So it is time for us to wake up and use our voices.
Yes.
Where are you off to?
Well, it's possible. I'm thinking it through, but I'm thinking of going to Hawaii. I was to head back to Thailand, but the borders closed. But now I'm starting to hear the borders might be opening. So I'm not sure exactly everything, but I'm looking at continuing the work. In possibly Hawaii, or we'll just see where the spirit leads, because
Yeah.
at any moment it may be go right, go left, and open the door.
I know, and that's amazing. And you're going to listen.
I am.
And it's funny because when you spoke about Hawaii, because this opportunity just came up recently for you, since you've spoke to that, I of course got the confirmation through somewhere how big of a hub Hawaii is.
It's huge.
And the need.
There's a huge need.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. And there's a lot that comes from Asia through Hawaii into the States and vice versa. Out of the state, well, we are the States, but the mainland, out of the mainland through Hawaii and around, the globe. So, yeah. So I see it as a possible divine appointment here would be my next one. Because what was interesting, a quick side note, in the Philippines, one of the girls spoke to me and said she wanted to go to Hawaii and work. And I at the time was focused directly on the Philippines, wasn't even thinking Hawaii. So when this opportunity came, I'm excited. But I think it's going to be not just working with trafficked victims. I believe I'm going to really do what is also my heart, which is to help those who are already working in trafficking, because it is a burnout rate that's huge.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. So I want to help with that, do healing work with that.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what I think is where I'm headed.
Where can they find you?
Well,
We'll have links at the bottom, but
yeah. Well, I have, I do mindfulness coaching. I do coaching and different things like that. And I have a link for that at ascendinghope.net. You can look that up. You will find me there. And then I'm also on my humanitarian work, which is the work overseas itself. There's also going to be a link to that organization. It's called The Cause. And they do a lot of different justice work throughout the world.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know this was your life, and it wasn't. And I've said this in the beginning, but if you wouldn't have taken the opportunity to heal, I mean, you served your purpose here on earth. As soon as you made that decision to say no more abuse, heal yourself and take the journey, because that was that crazy stuff, girlfriend, crazy stuff. But because you made that decision to stay here and to recover, and then you heard the calling and made the choice to go right, left, open the door.
Yeah.
All those people you've touched. It's a massive ripple effect, because it's not just the one person. It might be their child, it might be their family, it might be their sister, but the ripple effect is immense. And for you to make those decisions and follow the calling is huge. And I want to thank you, and it's going to choke me up.
I know, I'm choking out.
Thank you. Seriously. Thank you for sharing your story to help awaken people, because we need to know. You don't have to, get so engaged with this that it is overtaking your joy in your life. You just have to know that it is out there. It is happening. We have to say no to it, and whatever that means to you. Maybe it's getting out and voting. Maybe it's giving a few dollars to people who are doing this work. Whatever that is, that's what you should be doing. Saying no to this, because we should have no crimes against humanity, and anything you can do to help is just as immense.
It is.
It really is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. Take care.